In high seas or calm, both opportunity and risk lurk just below the surface. Answers require in-depth analysis. Welcome to BlackFin Group's Shark Cage podcast, where experts dip below the surface of important industry issues in search of hidden opportunities.
Good day, folks, and welcome to the Shark Cage BlackFin's podcast series. My name is Keith Kemp, President and CEO of BlackFin. I will be your host today. To start, I want to thank our sponsors. First, a special shout out to all of BlackFin's preferred partners, LoanPass, Mortgage Flex, Constellation Mortgage Solutions, IE Mergent, Flowify, CloudVerga, and so many more. All doing absolutely great things for this industry in the TPO space and the BI analytics space in order to help position organizations for more sales. So if you don't know about our preferred partners, I encourage you to please check them all out. Second, a shameless plug for BlackFin. We are the industry's best resource for everything and anything related to mortgage banking. Nobody in the industry really knows more about mortgage technology or is better industry experts than BlackFin. And it's all because of our deeply entrenched and trusted relationships in the mortgage banking space over the last 30 years. With that general intro, please join me in welcoming my good friend and, as it turns out, neighbor right here in Denver. Get together for lunch on occasion. Scott Stucky. He's the managing director of Global Recruiters Denver Tech Center. He's also a preferred partner of BlackFin. We've collaborated on a lot of different fronts, Scott, and it's really been a pleasure over the years. But Scott, hey, welcome to the Shark Cage. We're great to have you here.
Well, Keith, it's good to see you again, and I appreciate you guys having us. I always appreciate working with you guys at BlackFin.
Before we get into today's discussion around the most important assets at a company, which is their people, let me take a minute to really formally introduce you, Scott, and give them a little bit of background, the listeners, a little bit of background on all the amazing things you've done over the decades in the industry. Folks, Scott has over 35 years of executive management experience in the mortgage industry. He owns a business development and sales consulting firm called the Stucky Group and is a frequent public speaker on the local, regional, and national level. His experience ranges from executive vice president of software and data solutions at Settlement One, where he had full responsibility for the success of product strategy, technology alliances, marketing, sales, professional services. Prior to Settlement One, he served as Chief Strategy Officer and Chief Operating Officer at DocuTech, where he crafted the corporate strategy for the firm and ran the day-to-day operations of the business. Prior to DocuTech, Scott entered the financial services industry while at Alltel Information Services and at Fiserv, where he served in multiple management roles that include sales, operations, implementation, and product management. And for you Gator fans out there, Scott's graduated from the University of Florida. There's no doubt, after all your years in executive leadership, you know a thing or two about human capital, and which are the most important assets in really any organization. And that'll remain true regardless of what they come up with in AI, in or outside of mortgage. People will always be the core of an organization's success. So let me start with our questioning with really kind of talking about how organizations need to assess talent today. And as a result, Scott, of the last 12 months, we've seen the mortgage industry, unfortunately, have to shed again another 50 to 70% of its workforce. I mean, it's been brutal. You and I both know, and have been in this industry for decades now. We see this every 7 to 10 years, and every time is just as painful as the last. To have to let all these amazing people go. And you and I both know lenders will not be hiring thousands of folks back overnight. They're not going to be getting their bands back together anytime soon. It's going to take a little while. So for those lenders that are possibly having to look at paring back their talent even more, what should they be looking at in their current people? What advice do you have for them to help make those hard decisions? Is it based on talent? Is it based on cost? What do we, pare back a little bit more of the best based on multifaceted professional experiences, that they've been a processor, that they've been a underwriter, that they've done all these things? What say you, Scott?
Well, I mean, it's an unfortunate situation we're in with the market right now. There's no doubt. There's a lot of people that are out of work. A lot of people have been displaced. To your point, Keith, a lot of companies are having to scratch their head and say, "Gee, we maybe have to do this one more time." Generally, if that is the situation today, it's going to be financial in nature, right? They've just got too much expense on the books for what their production is allowing them to do. Given that, when you're deciding what do I do with the team that I've got, how do I make the decision who stays, who goes? A couple of things to look at is, do you have multiple job function capabilities with somebody? Are they able to perform multiple roles? Can they be more of a jack of all trades than just an individual specialist? That person potentially can do more things and plug more holes. To your point about we see this every 7 to 10 years, we do when rates change. I think that lenders are a lot like markets. They tend to slightly overreact. So when the boom is going on, they slightly overhire. And when the bust is going on, they slightly overfire.
Yeah,
Uh, so that's kind
well
of
said.
the way I think it works sometimes. Secondarily, it's what's the future look like for that individual in your organization, right? I understand right now it's pretty painful and it's pretty uncomfortable. But if we've got somebody that's got either great experience or great skills or great potential, and we see them in 3 to 5 years, assuming that the market somewhat normalizes, potentially being a key player, is that somebody that maybe isn't today, but in 3 to 5 years, does that person have leadership capability or does that person have, the opportunity to manage and lead? Then maybe that's a deciding factor in why you'd want to keep that person there. Or do they have the experience having done that? Maybe they're not doing it now because you've adjusted the organization and they're an individual contributor, but historically that person has the experience to manage or lead an organization. Then maybe you want to keep that person there as opposed to somebody that doesn't have that experience.
Mm.
And then beyond that, you're looking at you're looking at the payroll, right? If you've got two identical opportunities, generally you're going to let the one with more payroll go.
It's like you being on both sides of it, both on the origination side, running branches and regions for mortgage companies, and then on the technology side of things as well. I mean, it's always painful to see just these great people, and then we as an industry, we end up losing them because they have to go find another way to keep the lights on, keep food on the table for their families, and it breaks my heart every time, and I just wish we didn't have to endure such roller coaster with this industry, from that standpoint. Certainly some benefits from a technology standpoint, but I think those are some great insights and great advice as to, how to look at your staff and evaluate each one of them to make sure you're making the right decisions. So let's play off of that topic and let's talk a little bit about retention strategies for today. I've gone through, I've had to assess kind of, what's that next 10 or 15 or 20% that I need to cut. But now I need to think about how do I keep the best of the best that I have on staff today. And I need to be, as an organization, I've been so heads down. I think you see this too. Organizations are very heads down, reactionary to the market, as opposed to looking on the horizon and or even looking at, more strategic initiatives and strategies to retain their talent today. It's a really sensitive topic that we even here at BlackFin, we continue to see with lenders and the clients that we support week in and week out, struggling to make those difficult decisions on the next 10 to 20%. But let me ask, once a lender is cut as deep as they have, what then should they be focused on to ensure they can retain what might be the best of the best? What are those retention strategies that are best employed right now in a market like this? Is it training? Is it cross training? Is it giving them more money? Since I just cut a couple of the higher, costs because it came down to that decision, do I give them a little bit more money in order to entice them to stay? Is it benefits? Is it a more intense bonus program? I mean, what are some of those effective retention strategies for keeping your top talent today?
Well, Keith, I would say first off, they need to be thinking about it. And I think about 98% of them are not. Heads down, trying to make loans and, figuring, hey, somebody's going to leave, they might leave. There's not a job for them to go get out there in the market anyway, because unemployment is in our industry is as high as it is. So I think that's the first thing is, to a degree, you need to always be thinking about retaining your talent because your people are your best asset. once you've decided, hey, gee, maybe I should figure out how do I do this, to me, the number one thing is communicate clearly and do what you say you're going to do. Be truthful with your people. If there's more risk of layoff, let them know, this could potentially happen again, right? Don't say, oh, we're fine, we're good, don't have to worry about it, everything's going to be good. And then 90 days later, you do another layoff. Number one reason we hear for people leaving a company, and it's amazing to me that it's 2023 and we still hear this, is overbearing micromanagement. It's not money, it's not working too much time, it's just an overbearing micromanager that won't let me do my job. Look at yourself introspectively and say, is that something I'm doing? Get feedback from your peers and feedback from your team. How am I doing as your manager? What can I do to do a better job? Listen, hear what they've got to say. Some things you can't do, like maybe more money, right? Maybe you can't
Yeah.
improve the benefits. Maybe you can't do that. For a lot of the opportunities where we're putting a candidate into an opportunity, money's part of the deal, but things like time off, health insurance is a huge issue. We have a couple of clients that pay for 100% of healthcare. That is a major issue for people, particularly with small children and families. Talked to a candidate today in Oklahoma City, which is not an expensive market for cost of living. Their insurance coverage for family and dependents is $1,200 a month. That's a lot of money. That has a big impact. So, things that you can do to encourage people to get training and development, right? If you can't reimburse them for it, give them the time off if they need to go get the training. If there are local MBA things that are available in the local community where they are, that's for continuing education and recertification, particularly if the employee says, well, I want to keep my certs current, I'm willing to pay for that out of my pocket, give them the time off, let them go do that, encourage them to do that, and be straightforward and say, financially right now, we don't have any money to be able to spend on anything else, but here are some things that I can do. We want you to be here. We want you to be certified. We want you to continue in the industry. We think there's a future for you here. Obviously, if you've got financial resources, you can use those, bring them to bear. In my opinion, improving your benefits and your time off offering, even though it's an indirect expense to the employee, is better than offering them more payroll.
That's a really good point. And as it relates to the training aspect, I'll certainly plug BlackFin's BlackFin University, our leadership and management training courses. I mean, always available to help further educate people and manage them up, train them up into more effective leaders for when that market does come back. I mean, that's part of what I hear you saying too, is let's take advantage of a little bit of this downtime in order to really prepare our people for more extensive leadership roles when the market does come roaring back and we need to start hiring again.
Yeah, and we know that it's going to come back. Nobody knows when. Nobody knows how fast. Right? We know that the market will improve. And, if you can communicate truthfully, if you can make the commitment to say, hey, I can't reimburse you for that training now, but when things get better or we get to this, I'm willing to do that and have you resubmit that. Now, it may be a year or a year and a half. If you're willing to, you want to invest in yourself. I know that you don't want to pay the money out of pocket, but if you're willing to do that, we'll give you the time off, and whatever, in a year or 2 years from now, you come back and say, hey, I paid for that continuing education. Will you reimburse me? You know what? We're willing to have that conversation. Those things are really valuable to your employees. Number
That's
one thing
awesome.
from my perspective is listen to them.
Yeah, you started highlighting the statistics around why people are primarily leaving, and it's from that micromanagement. So as part of what I'm hearing you say there is firms need to, I mean, there's a lot of discussion around remote workers and just employers trying to force their employees back. And they've trusted them to work remotely, one, because they had to, and two, from a health standpoint. But is part of what I'm hearing you say is, while bringing them back into the office, empower them and show them, demonstrate to them that you trust them and to do their job and to execute. And we're all adults in the room, right? When I hire you, you're an adult. We know what the job is. We've communicated that, but I need to empower you and remove that risk of potentially being interpreted as micromanaging. Is that part of what I'm hearing you say too?
It is. It's definitely part of it, and particularly for technology resources, right? I mean, their mindset is, why do I have to be in the office? So, for a lot of technology companies, they were remote beforehand. So, and you can make arguments on both sides of it. It requires a different management style to manage remote people versus in-office people. You got to be really metric oriented when you have remote people. It's also something to consider. To your point, there's a trust issue. Well, why do you want me to come back in the office? A strong case can be made for because of the corporate culture that we've taken the time and the effort and the money to build here. Right?
Yeah.
It's the biggest complaint that remote employees have, if they have a complaint, is they don't feel they're part of the company. For the people that are in the corporate office, they don't know water cooler talk. They don't understand. They don't hear the scuttlebutt about what's going on. All of that office churn that takes place. If you've got a combination of in-office and out-of-office people, that's the number one complaint for out-of-office is they don't feel included. So
Yeah,
for
that's a
those
tough
people,
balance. I mean, because they're part of a community. When you're part of a
right?
company, you're part of a community, and if you're disconnected from that community, and your executive team isn't making, you know, employing strategies that pull you into the community and keep you connected, you feel like you're on an island unto your own, right?
Absolutely. And we have a small tech company we work with that's 100% remote, and they've been remote since the outset. So COVID was no big deal for them, from that perspective. They do a phenomenal job of having online meetings, of asking feedback. Hey, we put a new release of the product out. How did that project go? How did the client implementation go? What could we have done better? And the CEO of that company does a great job of taking that feedback and hearing and listening. Small company, 40, 50 people, but listening to, how could I make your job better? What would, if you're in implementations, what would have made the implementation project better for you? Was there a disconnect from expectations that maybe got set with sales? Or we rolled this product out and here were the features the product team was asking for. How well did we hit the mark? How well do our clients like it? What does customer success say?
That's good.
And utilizing that feedback. And they have, they have virtual happy hours. They have a virtual book club. So there are opportunities to participate and work with other people. Like if you're a software developer, you're in a scrum team all the time, right? So you may not have any interaction with the people in customer success, much less know who they are or what they're about. And you may find out that whatever, they like reading murder mystery books and you do too. And you get the opportunity to build some culture that way.
Connect. That's really good. That's really great advice. I appreciate that, Scott. Now, but those are techniques and strategies for retention today. Let's talk about retention strategies that might require a little more planning for future success. So in your role at Global Recruiters, you do a lot of placement of top and mid-level management executives for firms.
We do.
But for you to place that top talent in a new opportunity, that means oftentimes they're leaving a specific role. So what are you seeing that lenders or vendors or tech companies have done in the past that's not allowing them to retain that top talent? What should folks be doing today? What should they be planning for strategy wise, programs wise, to make sure that when the market comes back and they have a lot more options in the marketplace, that their chances of retention are going to remain much higher because they employed these particular programs or strategies, things that might be a little longer line fishing, if you will. I know you're a fisherman, so had to use that analogy. But is it cross training strategies and plans, or that you mentioned earlier? Is it that cultural aspect? I mean, what long-term things should they be planning now to make sure that they retain that talent when the market turns?
Well, again, number one complaint for the reason people leave is overbearing micromanagers. That's at all levels of the organization chart, all the way up to the C-suite. So a part of that is introspectively saying, is that me? Could I be doing a better job of leading this team? And then from a longer term strategic perspective, the higher up the organization chart that you go, when we talk to candidates about what are you looking for, or what would an opportunity be interesting for you, or when would you be willing to entertain a conversation about an opportunity? It's always less about the money and it's more about the opportunity and the fit. And granted, at the top of the org chart, you're getting paid pretty well anyway, typically. So further down the org chart, it becomes more and more and more about the money because they're trying to, grow up that org chart and earn more and provide for their families. So it becomes corporate fit. It becomes corporate culture. It becomes helping me develop. Like at a mid-level manager, what a mid-level manager wants to be typically is to become a senior level manager, right? That makes sense.
So what's that roadmap?
So what's that roadmap, right? How do I help you invest either in yourself, if we don't have the budget to be able to invest in training for you? How do I help you invest in yourself? And if you do earn certifications, and say you get a CMB, or say you get some other leadership certification, or maybe you go back and get a master's, are we in a position to be able to offer some kind of a reimbursement for all or a certain portion of that training that you're investing in yourself? And how do I, as your manager, talk to you and say, hey, Keith, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And then my job is to develop you to get you there, and sit down and say, you know what, Keith, I think you can do that. Here's a couple of things that we might want to get some arrows in your quiver. So let me help start figuring out on how to add some of that responsibility to your day to day. Here's some training and development work. Um, it sounds really hokey, and accounting and financial people don't like it, but great leaders are great people. They communicate with people exceptionally well. They hear them in their gut. They hear them in their heart, not just what they're saying.
Well said.
And when you've got
That's
a
really
leader that does that, that's leaders that people walk through walls for.
yeah, amen to that. Yeah, you're talking about the programs and kind of what's that roadmap, and I'm quickly recalling when I first started in this industry, some, I don't know, 30 plus years ago. There was, I knew I wanted to climb, but I didn't know how to climb or where to climb. And then I heard
Right.
that our organization had this fast track program. And I was like, I'm all in. Give it to me, bring it to me. And it was a well methodical management development training program that took the course of a year and allowed me to wear a hat in every ring of the organization: processing, sales. We were doing collections at the time because it was a finance company, albeit, 35% interest rates back then, 25%, but that was way back in the day. But having to sell those loans. And so I had to wear all the different hats and do the reporting of the manager. I mean, it's really getting into some of that very tactical stuff on a day-to-day basis, and not just a general, oh, here's the job, here's, the future job. And it shouldn't be high level roadmap. It should be very detailed roadmap so that your people are engaged and invested. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Is what, and again, back to adage number one: communicate clearly and tell the truth. What's the plan look like? Right? Okay, you get through the plan in a year and a half, whatever it is. I can't guarantee you I've got a management job ready for you. You'll be qualified, right? We'll look for one. Uh, I always ask my managers, I said, well, what I need you to do is develop somebody, one or two people in your team, that can take your job in the next 2 to 3 years, because I'm not planning to stay where I am, and I'm going to need somebody to come take my job. So that's going to be you. So
Which, and it's funny you say that because I can relate. I got that word of wisdom early on in my career, and I was always on the track of manage yourself out of a job, Keith. Make sure that you've pulled up the people that are behind you, prepare them so that they can take your job. And you may not know what the future holds, but don't worry, it'll take care of yourself itself. And the organization's always benefited from that mindset. So as leaders, we have a responsibility to think that way as well, and disseminate that farther down the ranks to bring our people up. It's a great insights, great wisdom, Scott. So let real quick, I generally don't go beyond three questions, because otherwise you might get bit in the shark if you're in the shark cage too long. But what if there are folks out there listening now? Uh, I mean, there's a number of executives that have been displaced recently that I know will be tuning in. But what's your advice for these highly skilled, mortgage executives, mortgage people, folks even on the front lines who are highly knowledgeable, have tremendous amount of skills and experience, have been in the space for the last 20 years. Or 30 years, they've waded through 2008 and the other downturns in the industry. What is it? What's your recommendation for them? What advice do you have for them during this difficult market where they're not necessarily going to find the ideal opportunity today? What do you say to them?
well, I mean, like you said, it's heartbreaking, right? There are people, they have families, they have bills to pay. It's a very difficult time right now. Um, So a couple different things. The most important asset that they have, particularly if they've been around for a while and they are a manager or a leader, is their network. So work your network, reach out to people, talk to people, tell them that you're looking. Do they have opportunities? That's the highest probability for you to find your next opportunity, is working your network. You can reach out to recruiters, particularly if you know you've done as I've done with you several times. Say, hey, I know this person. If you make that introduction to me for somebody that I know, I'm happy to talk to them and say, let's learn a little bit about what they're doing. What are they looking for? Honest with them and say, hey, it's a tough market right now, but we'll see what we can do. If somebody's really outstanding and excellent, we're willing to make a few phone calls on their behalf and see if we can open a door. As far as the job seeker, if you have the money, get your resume professionally written. It's well worth doing, about $500. If you're not comfortable doing that, don't talk about your experience and how many years you did something. Nobody cares. There's a million people out there that have got the same experience. Talk about the results of what you delivered. What was the performance improvement that your team did? What happened with the staff that you've got? How much did you grow something? If you were in the last downturn in 2008, talk about what you did to navigate that. How did you help your company get through it? How did you help them come out the other side? What have you seen and done before? Speak in specifics, in numbers, in objectives, in KPIs as best you can. Nobody cares that you were an underwriter for 20 years. There's a bazillion of those out there. What did you do as an underwriter for 20 years? How many files a day did you run? Were you a team lead? Are you a LAPSAR? Are you, Eagle certified, et cetera? So those are the things you want to talk about in your resume as you're telling your story about this. These are the results of what I've done, not just that I did this for 15 years.
This is you're bringing back all these words of wisdom that I've heard many decades ago, early in my career, which is you get paid for the value you bring. And what you're really saying is, hey, accentuate these value points with these organizations. Don't just talk about what you did, but how you did it, and the results of your impact, because that's what they're interested in, is the value that you bring to your organization. Right. That's great pearls of wisdom, Scott. I really appreciate that. Well, folks, this has been great advice from Scott during a very difficult time. And as I mentioned early on, there's nobody who probably understands human, capital better than our very own Scott Stucky in the mortgage industry. In other words, I'm hearing from you that lenders can't just have their heads down, hearing from you, Scott, that lenders just can't have their heads down in the market today in a survival state of mind. They need to be looking on the horizon. They need to define their ideal employee profile. They need to design and implement strategies to ensure both productivity today and retention strategies for today and the long term. And they have to think beyond things like compensation, but think about things like culture and helping people develop themselves both personally and professionally. It's certainly something that we employ at BlackFin. And unfortunately, folks do come through our organization and other organizations where they keep thinking about what's in it for me, and as opposed to collaboration, a mutual collaboration of how do we support each other's success in just short term and long term. And that's what's going to help us. Let's collaborate to have a healthy employee-employer relationship. Folks, if you want to learn how Scott and his team are helping lenders with placing top talent, check out their website at www.grn as in Nancy, D as in David, DTC, T as in Tom, C as in Charlie.com. That's www.grndtc.com. Scott, I want to thank you for being with us today. Really cool to collaborate with you on this front, and look forward to our next lunch.
Absolutely, Keith. Thanks so much for having me. I always appreciate working with you and with BlackFin.
Cheers. Until next time, this has been another exciting episode in the Shark Cage. Look forward to the next episode. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us in the Shark Cage. To be a guest on a future episode, send an email to info@blackfin-group.com. To find out more about the show or the information provided in this episode, visit BlackFin Group online at www.blackfin-group.com.